So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, Uliana and Lisa. I will start the presentation now. So as soon as I find it.
And I think everyone's been here, but if you haven't, we run through a short presentation and then open up for discussion.
Okay. As always, we come to this space in order to discuss and design in a collaborative process the economic principles and tools that we could define for a regenerative future. We believe, this is something Pam and I have worked on, we believe that there are small things that we could do now that can move us towards regeneration. And our goal is to find and uncover some of these small things. Last week, Pam took us through a discussion of paradigm shifts, and I have to tell you, it was a fantastic discussion. So we discussed the definitions of paradigm shifts, as well as we analyzed what it means to think of the parts and the whole, and that discussing merely the parts is not sufficient to understand the whole. Yeah. So we also discussed how solutions that are designed, assuming that we look at the parts only, will not produce solutions that will be sustainable in the long run. And we offer, once again, complexity science, which is the science of interconnected systems, as the underlying science under this paradigm shift. Yeah. So we, once again, from moving from reductionism to complexity, reductionism being the conventional model of science, a model that exists, of course, today as well, because complexity science is barely 40 years old. We recognize that our world is a web. It is a networked, interconnected web of life, if you will, that consists of agents and their interconnections. We recognize that this model, where we recognize both the parts and the interconnections, is a better model for reality than reductionism. So in the past sessions, 9 or 10 sessions, we have been discussing the properties of those agents and the interconnections. We would like to move forward into discussions about implementation of our new knowledge, our new paradigm into our lives. Yes. So in that sense, today, I'm going to walk you through a few things. First of all, what we may not realize it in a conscious way, but this is the way we have been taught to look at the world and how we intervene in the world. So I take the example of a sponge. We have been taught that if I intervene by dropping some ink on the sponge, blue colored ink, our expectation is that that blue colored ink will be taken up, will be absorbed by the sponge as is, and it will spread through the sponge as is. So in analogy, in a network system, we are thinking that we take a network, it comes to us in a pristine way, we intervene with blue ink, it drops onto one part or one agent in the network, and it spreads as is through the whole system, through the whole network, so that all of the agents in the network become blue. So the key point here is that the intervener, which is me, the human being, is in control. The human being is deciding what to do and what the results will be and should be. We design like this today. When we design chemical processes, mechanical machines, even medical system is based on these assumptions that the intervention will be taken up as is and will spread through the system as is. Yeah. But what is actually going on? So when a network system comes to us, it isn't so-called pristine, in quotes. It already has some properties. So you see in the first picture here to the left, each node, each part of the system has its own color. When we intervene with the blue ink, it lands on one part or one agent and it spreads. But how does it spread? Each agent connects to the agent that has received the intervention. It, sorry, it takes up the information that that part gives it through its interconnection. This second part says, okay, what am I going to do with this new information? Based on the current state of that system and its susceptibility to the new information, it changes itself. So each part of the network is responding differently to the same ink that has come in. So each part of the system makes its own criteria for response based on its current conditions and its receptivity to that information. So what actually flows through the system is not the perturbation, not the blue ink.
I'll take a large hazelnut coffee, soy, and hazelnut cat latte.
Oh,
So what actually flows through the system is not the blue ink, not the perturbation, but the response of each part of the agent. So going back one slide, if you look at the bottom, our expectation is that delivery of the ink will spread through the network as is and make the entire network blue. But what actually happens is that each part takes up that blue ink or that information, reacts to it based on what its parameters are, what its properties are, and the result is different. So when we think of intervention, we should not think in terms of how does the intervention spread through the system? We should ask ourselves, how does the response of each part spread through the system? Yeah. It's a completely different way of looking at the network. Now, from there, I go to butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is commonly defined as the flapping of a butterfly's wings in one location could potentially translate, could cause a tornado in another location. So I'd like to take you through a short demonstration from Wikipedia. They produce a really nice video. So I hope you can see this. Pam, is it visible?
yes, it is.
Okay. So I'm going to pause this for a minute. What's going on here is we have a pendulum. That little black and orange thing is a pendulum. The pendulum was tested 6 times. It was videoed, and then that video was put together as 6 different cells. Each time the pendulum is perturbed, that means the human finger, as you can see, moves the pendulum. The human finger tries to move each time in exactly the same way. But I'd like you to watch carefully what happens as the pendulum goes through each rotation. Yeah, so I'm going to count the rotations for you. Okay, this is rotation 1. Rotation 2 starts now. Rotation 3. Rotation 4. And now this is rotation 5 coming in. Watch this carefully. 5. Note the bottom left has become completely different than the others. And each one of them is now different, wildly different. It only took 5 rotations for it to become completely different. So I'm going to pause it here. You can go back to this, watch it yourself through through Wikipedia if you wish. Yeah. Okay. So what is that? What's going on here? And I'd like to explain it through networks. On the left, we've got the little butterfly. On the bottom right, we've got the tornado. The butterfly flaps its wing. Its flapping alters the air in its vicinity, in its neighborhood. The air, the flapping travels through the air. The air is in touch with other subsystems along the way. Each subsystems reinterprets the change it receives from the flapping of the butterfly's wings and reinterprets it based on its internal conditions and its internal properties. Having done so, it passes this change on through the entire system all the way down until it creates a tornado. You know, potentially creates a tornado, right?
Possibly.
Possibly. So the question is, did the flapping of the butterfly's wings cause the tornado? So we can see that the actual flow of response goes through very complex ways through many, many, many agents in the network. It may or may not lead to a tornado, but can we really say that the flapping of the butterfly's wings caused that tornado? Yeah. So quickly, I want to point out to everybody all the properties we've been discussing of complex systems, such as self-organization, feedback loops, emergent effects. Every one of them is at play here. You can see it, you can visualize it, you can feel it. So the question of causation comes up, and that is the main thrust of today's discussion. Now that we understand complex systems as being interconnected systems, how should we view cause and effect? Our current paradigm says you've got an effect, maybe you've got a problem, maybe you've got a pothole in the road. Go backwards in time and figure out what caused it. Fix that cause. If you fix that cause, you will have fixed the effect. But if we translate that to this network, what does it actually mean? And before I open it up for discussion, I wanted to point to you a little bit one thing. We had proposed a definition of regeneration saying that everything we build today, the physical structures, the mental structures, the theoretical frameworks, which are structures, these structures become the initial conditions for the next step. So back to that little demo of pendulum in Wikipedia, the initial conditions can determine and create vastly different outcomes. So if we want to be regenerative, we should look very carefully at the structures we create today, because they will become the infrastructures of tomorrow. Thank you. Let's open it up for discussion. Yeah.
Bravo, Tanuja. Thank you so much. That brilliant.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, Catherine. That's exactly right. Like telephone game. The only thing, what makes me feel, what gives me almost a spiritual feeling is to know that every part of the system is expressing itself. And it makes me feel that I live in a world that is inclusive, where every part has a role to play and to express. The only time that paradigm becomes cancerous, becomes negative, is when we don't want or allow each part to express itself. So we are in this world together and connected, but we each have a role to play and a place to express ourselves. To me, this is the most spiritual way to view the world. It's almost like taking physics and making it a spiritual pursuit.
Mm-hmm. And remind folks that if you use the hand gesture of raising your hand, once we get going, we often have people waiting in line to talk. Catherine, yay, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I love it, Tanisha. You're just wonderful in being provocative. It's just really fabulous. For me, we're hooked on structures, and we think of them as permanent things, and they really are temporary. And if we allow them to come and go because we're paying attention to the process, I don't think we need to worry about structures, because they'll be useful and then not useful. And the process itself will drive that change. The work that I've done around values is just exactly that, understanding the processes and dynamics that have to exist in order for life to continue. And this is taken from what the earth does. If we do that, then life will continue. And how that happens doesn't matter, as long as it's connected and in sync with how things happen. So the what's not so important. It's the how that really makes the difference, the processes. And we're not used to thinking about that. We want discrete answers and finite things that we can tangibly touch and do in practice, and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Great,
Yeah.
great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Catherine, you're right. I think our eyes have become so trained to physical things that we land on structure and we don't see process because it's ephemeral. It's not something you can actually see.
Well, we
And-
don't see invisible structures either, because there are those. I mean, habits are a great example. A habit is an invisible structure. And the minute you try and change it, you see the structure, but you don't see it until you try and change it. And that's true about organizations too. You don't really understand the structure till you try and change it. All of a sudden, those network things come up. You start to see where the connections are that were not really visible at that time.
I want to remind, though, that the frameworks that we quote believe in are also structures. For example, capitalism is a structure. Think about how it has impacted who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
Well, cause and effect. Oh, go ahead.
Well, cause and effect is really, I have to go back to my values work, because all of that is about invisible structures, and it's all about cause and effect as well. We don't understand, we don't see those structures. We haven't seen those structures. And that was one of the brilliant things for me with Jane Jacobs, is that she saw values as systems, and the system is the structure that those values create. So and like all other living systems, they have purposes. So you can kind of deduce and kind of go backwards. So there's a value system that's all about being safe and protective. And there's a whole bunch of values that are connected to that system. So you can see some of the values at work. And if you're aware of the components of that system, you can then deduce what's actually happening, what the hidden purpose is that people aren't articulating because they're clinging on to certain values. It's really interesting to be able to see that, but then to manage it. To be able to see what the difference is. And that's where I've gone to Earth. If we take her model, because her whole intent is life. That's all she wants to do, is make sure that life thrives. She's very pure about that. There is no equivocation. So it's a context that can be trusted. And it just needs to be practiced.
Yeah,
Thank you, Catherine.
If I could make one comment about structure, I appreciate very much your saying that structure comes and goes, and that's the kind of the training we need. And to give one example, if you remember the crash of Lehman Brothers in 2008, this multi-billion-dollar bank was gone in 1 week. And its structures, such as physical structures, employees, computers, software, everything still existed, but the bank was gone. That's just an example of how a structure looks like it is a hard, immovable thing, but it isn't.
Yeah.
No structure is actually. So thanks. Michael, you had your hand up. Is that, but you just changed your mind, I think? Is that right? Okay, then
Okay.
Ricardo.
Thank you. I want to share with you the recent experience I witnessed here in Venezuela about infrastructures around the agro business or the farming or the food system production. It was very much powered by banking and loans, and what this financial system wanted, their investments in houses and machineries and things that were built, heavy things that were built. When we passed the recent years through different crises, many of the farms were, going through the collapse, and most of those farms or agribusiness didn't perdure in time. They are now selling the farms, and they are huge investments. I mean, there's some WhatsApp chats where people offer their, thousands of hectares with, yellow machinery, caterpillars and tractors, and but they are gone on the system. So what I wanted to share with you is that if we don't change our paradigms and try to design permanent systems, that's about to happen. These farming systems that rely on fossil fuels or in this current financial system is hard to be permanent on time. So that's about my quest, is how to design a system that goes through time, even if there are some disruptions or collapses going around.
Ricardo, first of all, I want to offer my heartfelt support for Venezuela, which I believe the inflation rate is 3,000% at the moment, something like that.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Yeah.
We don't care about that anymore, because
Yeah.
if we pay too much attention, we go crazy, So
Yeah.
yeah.
But if there's anything that a regenerative community could come up with that could be supportive, that would be absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I appreciate your point that we need structures that can go through these kind of massive changes and crises and still take it through to the right place.
Yeah. Colleen.
I've been thinking a lot about system dynamics, things like resistance and momentum and things like that. And I think that very often that's not taken into account, and as we try to make changes and whatever. And I think in order for human beings to try to control things more, we turn complex systems into complicated systems. And then, so that we can try to control it more. and then, you know, a natural progression of trying to control, you know, manage a complicated system is we try to centralize the thing.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we run into some real problems. Initially, we may not see an effect because of the resistance in the systems, or there's some momentum already there, and it's not real obvious what the effect of that thing is that we've changed. But over time, then you begin to see what's happening. And you know, my husband and I have been in the medical area for 50 years. And as we have seen it become more centralized, in some cases, I think we've seen it become much less intelligent. Because there's fewer people that, you know, are managing the little pieces of it. And so you know, I think that as we think about becoming more regenerative, perhaps that's the one thing that we can have the most influence on, is to decentralize the thing so that the various aspects of it can return the intelligence. You get more in touch with the causes and effects, because they affect you more directly when it's decentralized. So I don't really know where I'm going with this. It's just kind of, you know,
Colleen,
a stream of consciousness.
I want to respond because I really understand I think what you're getting at, which is the energy of resistance and of momentum are both elements. I see them of the complex systems we're talking about and learning to understand. So you're absolutely right and that's what we're asking this morning. That was our question. You know, how might you think about cause and effect? Well, cause and effect has lots of things going on, including the energy of momentum and resistance. So absolutely, yeah, I think you make a great point. Gene, sir.
I continue to think about structure and behavior like the chicken and the egg. So that structure influences behavior and behavior influences structure. So we live in a world of circular causality. So cause is responsible for an effect, and the effect is responsible for the cause. And it's a reinforcing structure that can be either virtuous or vicious, depending upon which way it's going. And once it goes in a particular direction, it's hard to reverse.
Yeah, Jean, the point about vicious versus or vicious cycle, the emergent effect of a set of behavior patterns, the pattern that emerges due to certain behaviors could be vicious or not. Right? So it's not the particular behaviors, the particular processes that bring a system down. It is the combination.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to manage systems. Someone else brought up the word management. Manage systems looking at the emergent properties, not at the specifics of it. And that's one of the areas we want to take this discussion towards, is understanding the patterns of a complex system, because that's where it's at. Yep. Okay.
So over the past 4 or 5 days, I've been listening to a lot of videos by Peter Zion, and the connections, relationships are much broader around the entire world than I was ever aware of. It's sort of mind-boggling. And here's a link to one of his latest videos that I found really impressive.
What is his
Thank
name?
you.
Jean, could you type that in, please?
Peter Zihan.
Okay,
Peter,
yes. Thank you. This is excellent.
there.
Okay. Michael, welcome.
Well, Denisha, twice in one day. What a treat. Thank you. I was trying to figure out what to say, and so I have two sets of things. First is to just gush, absolutely gush. In respect and in what a privilege it is to be able to sit here and listen to you speak. I too am a teacher. I too have been seeking to break out of a linear way of thinking and being, and understand how to be a systems thinker and participant. And there's always so much more to learn. And one of the things that I have been articulating in 20 Ways to Sunday, I'm struggling with the whole cause and effect and how it works differently. But I knew I didn't understand. But what you helped me grasp today with the sponge and the interplay of the responses was to see it in a way that I had not understood, and I'm just very grateful. I feel it's a portal into an entire. It's a very significant thing that I'm only able to grasp emotionally, and not all the ramifications across my life. But one of and this is where the second, so thank you. The place my mind jumped as you were speaking was in a conversation earlier today. I was reacting to, David Sloan Wilson. I think he's an evolutionary biologist who's making this case for moral prosociality and how to evolve it. And his hypothesis, as I understand it, I might be completely butchering it, and this is one I'm trying to articulate it, and you can either tell me if you think it makes sense or if I missed something or what. But basically, one of the things he was saying is that there are two types of complex adaptive systems. One was an open one, another one was, let's say, closed, and that the open one was driven by selfishness in a sense, and the closed one had the discipline of mutualism and of, so that in an open system where people are just doing their own thing, you get undesirable behavior, and when there's coordinated mutualism, you get a different level of. And I thought, I don't think it's quite that simple. That when you get the next level of organization, all over again, the dance of between the me and the we arises, between what I was hearing today, between attraction and aversion, the resistance, all kicks in all over again, and how to carry awareness of that in a way that elevates the sacred. And I don't even know what I mean by that anymore. But if that made any sense at all, any thoughts about sensing and participating in the resacralizing, in the elevating of the sacred, how to recognize one is or isn't on a path. Is it how do you make sense of whether or not you're
Right.
Yeah.
Hard question, I know.
Michael, when I hear the word sacred, for me, it means a visceral sense of feeling whole or feeling united with the whole. Let's put it that way. And to me, that's what sacred means. And so when you say resacralize, if I can sit back and look at a problem and then look at it as it is connected, as it is part of the whole, I always get a sense of presence, being in the presence of the sacred. That doesn't mean that I'm going to tackle the whole world all at once. I'm looking at a problem because that's what's in front of me, and that maybe is my job, whatever. But if I can place it within the whole, then I have resacralized myself. And that's what I look for.
Lovely. Lovely.
Bam. Thank you.
So when I look at
Right.
everybody's picture on
Oh.
Zoom, I'm resacralized. Rick, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you on the podium here and ask you to explain your comment. Circular causality is reductionist.
Oh, and you are muted, Rick.
Yeah. I put in 2 comments. One of the things I do as an equity muse is to sort of find the exceptions to whatever's being said or the limitations of it, because I think that's where more nuanced thinking can emerge. So if you take the chicken and egg metaphor, if you want, an egg can always become a chicken, but a chicken can't become an egg. It can be bicircular, so you can have circular dynamics. There's no question about it. But you have to hone in on where those circular dynamics are going on. And there's no doubt that it occurs, but within a complex adaptive system, there are many other things other than circular dynamics. For example, somebody mentioned, the virtuous and the vicious cycle. I prefer to use the frame of spirals, that they're concurrently going on in multiple dimensions in a myriad of ways that it's very difficult to discern to what extent virtues are triumphing over the viciousness of flaws, whatever. So that dynamic is going on all the time. So it's much more complex than just thinking about circular dynamics. And then the other one, I just put a comment there in the thing about the limitations of using chemistry and biomimicry metaphors. There's no question they're helpful heuristics for expanding people's thinking about complexity, but they have significant limitations when you're looking at things that are far more complex, which has to do with, navigating the turbulent seas of our complex web of self-inflicted wicked problems, extending from isms, inequities, human rights abuses, climate change. I mean, all those things are interconnected. So in terms of thinking about a hierarchy of understanding, you can, the lowest level is linear reductionist causality. And then you can go up a hierarchy to a point where there's such a myriad of influences that, if you're savvy enough, you could have predicted the economic collapse of 2008, 2009. And some people did, because they understood how corrupt the system was. They knew it was a house of cards and it was going to collapse, but a lot of people didn't know that. And the same thing applies to any other complex problem like the Ukraine war or political corruption or autocracy or whatever. So I'm just interested in people's reactions to the comments that I put in the chat. So I'm Rick and I'm done speaking.
Thanks, Rick. May I make a comment, Tanuja? Or do you want to respond to that first?
No, you go, Pam, you go.
Okay. I've been thinking a lot lately about the paradoxes in life and how life is just full of paradoxes. And for us to begin to understand almost anything, it's somewhat necessary, and maybe there is an alternative, and maybe there are brains big enough, but you need to somehow bracket what you're thinking about in some way that allows you to think about what's going on. And I always try to have great empathy for human society, that we've really done the best we could at every turn, given what we knew, given what we understood at that time, which is not to say, paradoxically, that there haven't been evil people out for bad things or bad ideas, but that in the main, we're all trying to do well, whether we're a caveman going out and focusing and hunting and killing to feed the family, or we're the cave woman back in the camp taking care of the kids and chatting and figuring out how to multitask. I mean, all the way through, you can look with generosity at the decisions humans have made, given what they understood in that moment and what made sense. So while I understand the purpose of always finding the problem with whatever is being said, the paradox is the need to bracket what we're talking about in a way that we can get a working understanding of it to then apply it to the whole. So those are the thoughts that I've come up with, and so at the moment, that's what I have. And Colleen, you are up next.
Well, I'm thinking that we need to start the study of anthropology younger. Because I think that, if you look back through history, you see a lot of repetition of mistakes because people don't know that this thing leads to this thing that leads to this thing and whatever. And I'm always, being, in my 70s, I look back over my life and how things have changed and whatever. And younger people will come to me and they'll say, yeah, but this and that. And, we don't want the old ways. We want something that's new. And I'm just saying, are you sure that the new thing you are wanting is actually new?
New.
Or is it just the repetition of something that happened 100 years ago? And so I see a lot of that sort of mentality of, we're tired of the old things. Well, yeah, the old things are just what your parents did. What about your grandparents and your great grandparents and people 150 or 1,000 years ago? Are you just repeating another mistake that they made? And so, I think that the idea of morality, as I've seen through the healthcare thing, I mean, I'm really grateful for the things that have been learned over the last 50 years. But at the same time, what I'm seeing in healthcare is that they're ignoring their own rules now. The rules that brought about safety and effectiveness, and now we're shortcutting it because of economics and some of these other factors. And I think we need to maybe start with anthropology in the 3rd grade.
Rick.
Yeah, if I could just maybe dovetail on that comment, because I work in healthcare
You know, Rick,
do.
Rick, wherever you're
And I think
standing,
the whole focus on, studying, you can hear me? If you can
No,
hear
you're
me.
breaking up.
Oh,
I'll take my camera off. Is that better?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
now?
better.
we really
Okay,
missed
yeah.
the beginning.
Okay, I just want to dovetail on what Colleen was saying. I work in healthcare too, so I empathize with what you're talking about. I think it's not just anthropology; it's also political science that we have to sort of dive into, that are the sort of macro level influences that affect healthcare. I mean, I'm particularly interested in the issue of inequities, longstanding interest in inequities. But I just want to go back to what Pat was saying about the metaphor of putting brackets on things. There's no question that we have to do it. But actually, one of the problems is sometimes we don't take the brackets off, and we have to zoom out to see whether we put our brackets around the right thing or the right process.
Absolutely.
So it's a dynamic between. There's reductionism is only useful if you can zoom out and see it from a complexity perspective. If you zoom in with a reductionist perspective and stay within that mindset, then that's where a lot of problems get created, because we're not looking at unintended consequences of reductionism. So reductionism isn't inherently a bad thing. It's when we're rigidly reductionistic and linear in our thinking that we're going to fall over ourselves and make just mistake after mistake after mistake, which comes to the point that Colleen was talking about, which is we keep on making the same stupid mistakes over and over again because we haven't learned how to understand and foster our human understanding towards virtuous development. And our religious systems, our educational systems have clearly failed. If they were more effective, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. And the mess is not getting better, it's getting worse. So in terms of, thinking about, systemic redesign of processes, content, structures and whatever, we haven't designed a governance system that enables for us all to strive, thrive, and flourish for the greater good of all. It's not designed for that. It's designed for horrendous inequities. And I think we're in deeper doodah than we ever have been. So I'm Rick, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Rick. I agree absolutely. And that is the very point Tanuja's slides were making today. Yeah. And not that we're in deeper doodah, but that we really have to zoom out and look at the cause, the true causes and effects, the unintended consequences of our actions. Yeah.
But Pam, I would say that we are actually, we may agree to differ that. I mean, I think that, just, with expanding population, the complexity of political governance, the regression to autocracy and dictatorship, nationalism, I mean, these forces are much greater than has ever been seen in the history of humankind because the scale is so much bigger. And so, I think sometimes we're a little naive about the dystopian trajectory we're on, and if we don't have the courage.
We've lost you, but I imagine you're saying if we don't have the courage to look at the truth of
At the
what's
moment,
going on.
I think there has to be a complete evolution. Well, it was not so much the truth, but we have to work towards seeking truth. I'm always worried when people say the truth. I think it's a question of seeking truth. Anyway, I've said enough, and I'm Rick, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Oh, everyone's
You think-
quiet. What happened?
Do you think, well, this is a big, important thing, worthy of much thought. Maybe everyone has concluded their current thoughts for the moment. Is there anyone else who'd like to share anything? We've reached the end of the hour.
Yeah. No, this is great. This is great. So yes, Pam, we have reached exactly on time. It's amazing. Amazing. But we will continue on this trajectory of ours about talking about management of complex systems. I want to use the word management carefully. Someone pointed out to me that management is a process or a practice of human control over things, top-down control. And I want to say that's not the way I mean it, but more will become clear as we go. Because clearly we are living in a complex adaptive system. We are living here. We need to understand how to live in it and live with it such that we don't become degenerative, such that we regenerate life itself.
Yeah.
I would just briefly offer the phrasing to become the system.
Yeah, yeah. Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But a great note to conclude on.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming. And we're also here by popular demand on Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific time. So if that works for anyone, or you'd like to join us, we had 11 people last week that joined us, and we are running the same slides. We brought them up to speed quite quickly. So Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, we have a slightly different group of folks, and we talk about the same subject. And any ideas that you guys have that you'd like us to fold into what we're talking about, we welcome your thoughts as always, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
And I'd also like to request your help to point out any interesting articles, especially as related to regeneration and finance or economics, because that's what this sessions are about. Because we would like to reinterpret what is being written through the eyes of complexity. So we can ground ourselves, we can move forward with the new paradigm. So thank you.